Welcome to Electrolysis Unplugged, an after-hours chat beyond the probe with Joannie and Stephanie. We're here to dive deep into the world of electrolysis, education, and all things hair removal.
Whether you're a seasoned professional or just curious about the art of permanent hair removal, we've got the insights, tips, and fun stories to keep you plugged in.
So grab your tools, take a seat, and let's get into it. This is Electrolysis Unplugged, brought to you by the Electrology Education Coalition. We are back at answering your questions. Last week, we started off a conversation at the very end when someone had asked about working with hair transplant. When we started, last week, there was a conversation on Electrology International talking about, can we work on hair transplants? And how do we work on hair transplants? And so let's talk about this a little bit further because the conversation regarding working on transplanted hair, and I think this is a conversation that we could actually move into the understanding of what that person was advertising as permanent hair removal for the FUE. And I'm going to go into that after I talk about this. So in doing a transplanted hair, if you ever get a chance, the Hinkle lectures on Michael Bono's YouTube talks about how they remove a transplanted hair and how that whole unit is then put into an open area and then re-germinates and becomes a strong hair. In doing so, they take the best rooted hairs of the head, usually, and they then take that and they graft that into the new skin. But because of that, they tend to be a little bit more tenacious on how to break them down. I will say that in my own personal world of hair removal, I did a couple different ways of going about this. First, if it was a lot of hairs, myself, I would go with laser hair removal first to shrink down the size of the hair. It didn't necessarily help to break it down completely in those spaces just because of how strongly and how deeply rooted those were. But it definitely weakened the structure of the hair and made anything I did from there on out much easier as an electrologist. Many of you know that I dabble in many modalities of electrolysis. And so my favorite modality is either a low slow thermolysis with pulses in this area or a pulsed blend current. So the reason I like to do that is there is such a strong structure there that going at it fast and hot usually makes it very difficult to extract the hair. And you have to do many retreats. It's because you just can't put enough time and enough energy into that space to protect the skin. So a lot of times it's about balancing it back down a little bit lower and kind of just doing a slow roast. If anybody knows this about me, if you ever see this on my personal Facebook and stuff like that, I love to cook, and so I think about how we cook hair in terms of how we cook food, and how we cook a thick, juicy, crazy hair like that is very much a crock pot cook. Okay. That is you just going in there and marinating it for a longer time frame and really getting that structure to weaken without causing too much trauma. What's interesting about a transplanted hair is that it tends to create a lot of inflammation. And I think that has more to do with the scar tissue that is included in that. Because if you ever look at when you're working through scar tissue just blows up like a balloon when you're working in those areas. And it's the nature of how that structure is of that skin. So that's how I personally go about it. I definitely love, out of all things to do in that area, would be a laser treatment to start with just to kind of clean up the edge line. And then I go in there with a pulsed blend. Basically, Pico blend or Omni blend are probably the two that I would use the most. If I was using my Apples, if I was using my Silhouette tone, I'd probably go with a soft blend in that, just a nice short, not short, nice soft overall energy. Just because if I'm making it too hot too fast, the inflammation just hugs that hair, and I just don't want that. So that's how I do it. I don't know about you, Joanie, if that's the kind of the same approach you do from a thermolysis avenue, or how you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, usually the thicker, deeper the hair, the longer timing, the lower intensity you have to use because power spreads out further when you have more time. And so the bigger the root structure, the more you have to have the actual heat reach further into the collateral tissue, so into the outside. And so for those types of hairs, when you have deeply rooted hairs, yeah, you have to kind of slow everything down. Don't try to do things like that with Pico Flash. It's just the current doesn't carry enough. There's too much resistance in the tissues for that kind of intensity, and it doesn't work well. On a side note, when you're talking about strategies of removing hair transplants, if you're redoing somebody's hairline, um, you have to incorporate techniques like feathering, which can help with the inflammation too. So you want to be careful because you don't want to give anybody the doll head effect where everything is just perfectly straight and very very thick just at in a border. And so feathering, meaning that you kind of remove every other hair, every one out of three, so that you can thin it out. Laser would be a good way to do that because when you're just sometimes kind of atrophying some of the structures of the hair follicles themselves, it might even help to soften up that doll head effect, without having to really remove that much.
Absolutely. And like just the other day, I had somebody on my TikTok, actually one of my local friends, who's a cis male with like he's balding, 36 years old, and just really tired of kind of chasing the follicle. And he's like, "Can I do hair electrolysis on this?" And I'm like, "Let's talk about this." Because when we go for such a big task in front of us, and what's left behind is stronger hair, it's going to take you longer. And even in my past, when doing laser on an entire scalp, it takes a lot of work to get it to look as even as possible. And a
Mhm,
lot of times you look more like weird Barbie before you look like you could grow it out or not grow it out and look normal. And what I mean by weird Barbie, I'm sure every one of you had tried at some point in your life to trim Barbie's hair, and you just had like weird patches kind of like everywhere, kinda like the Cynthia doll in Rugrats,
mhm,
and it was an issue, and so that's actually what it can look like because when we're tightly packing those pulses with laser, that overlap is enough to create kinda uniformity
mhm,
in hair removal, but if you miss spots, then you end up with these little sprigs of hair growth. Sometimes they look like half moons, depending on if your overlap wasn't that good, and if your overlap was good, sometimes in the corners down in each edge, there's this little area that's kinda like a star shape,
mhm.
all circles that didn't quite get hit, and that's like that little Cynthia sprig, that's popped off to the side. So, definitely something to like, think about when you're working that way. The reason I said to bring up FUE when it comes to this, and if you ever wanna have a nightmare, you can go onto YouTube and type in FUE, F as in, like, Frank, U as in uniform, E as in echo, okay? And, you will find out very quickly, um, that type of hair removal was trying to get going. It was happening more in, we were seeing it a lot in like South Asian community area. We were seeing it some in Russian communities, that they were going in instead of doing electrolysis hair removal, they were taking the hole punching device that you do in transplants and hole punching people's faces with
Mhm,
their unwanted hair. Now, about 2 years ago, this person posted, it was a doctor, I think, if I remember correctly, it was out of I think she was out of India, and she was like, "Look at this new permanent hair removal technique." She was doing this all on somebody's chin, and the electrology community kinda, like, blew up. We were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, that is not electrolysis, don't call it electrolysis. Like, yes, you're doing permanent hair removal, but you're also doing permanent skin removal." Like, it was a whole thing. And she was like, "Oh, no, 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 wait, you'll see the after effect." Instead of seeing the after effect, we just saw the videos get taken down, okay? Which means that you probably didn't have the after effect you were hoping for. When they hole punch the skin, if it's on top of your head, your hair hides that, right? So when it grows out, you don't get to see what that looks like. The problem is that looks a lot like a golf ball. So if somebody were to shave over the areas that they had done the FUE for hair transplants on the back of the head, you would actually see a golf ball texture to the back of that person's head. But nobody does that because if you're getting hair transplants, you're not shaving your head bald for the rest of your life, hopefully. And so you never get to experience that. When you moved it to the face, this is an area that we're trying to do permanent hair removal on, and we're trying to give you good looking skin afterwards, and you're doing the same hole punching technique to the face. So sometimes you'll hear people ask you those questions on your table, and I'm guessing it just got just viral enough that when people were looking up hair removal procedures, that it showed up on their For You page, and it was a nightmare. Very bloody. Uh,
Yes, it was
oh,
disgusting.
it was bad, bad, bad. And so it's definitely hair transplant procedures, very effective for removing the whole entire unit of hair. Very strong hairs, but not necessarily good for hair removal.
No,
So
leaves a gnarly scar. So that's the reason why if your client wants to have intact skin, removing that big of a diameter just means they're gonna have holes in their face. So
yeah.
that's why we don't do that.
So another that makes sense. Yes, it does. So another great question that we sometimes get because the amount of people go like, do you treat everywhere in the body? And it's like, yeah, everywhere in the body. And they're like, everywhere. So ears and nose um, can be treated as long as you can access the follicle opening. Okay. But one of the questions that we get is like, can we treat ears and nose? Because not many people are taught that in their initial parts of school. And it is a little bit difficult to work on those because you're dealing with more cartilage than you are like fleshy parts. But it is definitely something that can be done. Um, they seem to be a little bit harder to break down by comparison. But good insertions and you can kill those bad boys really nicely. If inside your nose or inside your ear you get into the mucous membrane, you've gone too far. You should not be getting yourself into the mucous membrane because you're basically taking a risk of being in the danger triangle. And you're heightening that chance of um, one, you can't see your follicle opening, and two, that you're putting foreign bodies into an area that shouldn't be.
Yeah, MRSA infections.
Okay, so another great question that we got was, how long does it take to clear a beard for patients with PCOS or transgender women? And the big part about the bigger picture about this is whether or not someone has their hormones managed. So, I know that coming up, we have some conversations with Joanne's continued education and something upcoming events about the staircase model. Um, that is probably the most efficient way to go through bulk hair removal, so that patients can see large volume hairs cleared. If you haven't gotten to watch her staircase model lecture, I do heavily recommend going to one of the upcoming lectures to see it, because it does really help kind of break this down. But in short, if a patient is medically managed with their hormone imbalances, so whether that be a transgender woman that is on androgen blocking medication, or a woman, a cisgender woman with PCOS that's also on androgen blocking medications. If they're managed, you should see that in your same average that you see with any other person, as long as their hair growth is maxed out. Okay. So, say for example, you had someone that they have, a strong case of hirsutism. It's like a 4 or above, um, but we're not necessarily full beards, then you have the propensity to grow hair. And if you demanage whatever your medical side is, you may be chasing hairs down the road. But what's here and now, as long as you stay managed during that time, you should be able to achieve permanent hair removal in about a year and a half to 3 years of a stronger hair
Just like
follicle,
anybody else.
just like anybody else.
Yep.
The minute you don't manage that, it is like throwing pennies in a bucket. You will eventually get there, but it takes a long time to get there because we're chasing what is feeding those hairs, those little androgens that just love to grow a hair. And if it's not all activated, then you're going to be chasing it for a while.
Yep.
Um, the other factor, and I'm sure Joanne and we've talked about this before, is financial availability.
Yeah.
So, if somebody is not able to do it through insurance, they have not a lot of financial availability, that timeline does increase substantially. but it's not because of our technique. We can't change that portion of it. A hair growth cycle is a hair growth cycle. But like we can do our best to get you as close to possible. But if, say, for example, you needed it 2 hours a week, right? So just to get you maintained, but all you could afford was 15 minutes, obviously your timeline's going to be longer because what you need is not what I can get you.
I've had plenty of clients that would be coming, let's say they lived part of the year in Hawaii, and then they would come and get their hair removal when they were back in California. And so, even cases like that, where we would chip away at it for just a few months out of the year, will get you permanent results. I think that anytime that we're treating a hair, we're doing damage. You're chipping, you're getting a little bit closer to your goal, which is, clearance, right? So there's always some, some benefit, even if it's just one appointment, even if it's a couple appointments, just once a year or whatever it is. The time frame ends up being a lot longer in cases like that. But it's, as long as the client understands that, if that's all that they can afford, or that's all that they can devote to it, so it depends, or that's all that they can tolerate to do,
Mhm.
then it is what it is, so they will get there. It will be slower, but I do have to say that in between sessions, for me, they absolutely cannot uproot any hair. So no threading, no waxing, no tweezing whatsoever. If you start doing that, you're completely undoing what I'm doing, and then you might as well open the trash can, take your cash, and toss it in, because there is absolutely no point in doing electrolysis when you're reinforcing the roots as I'm trying to kill them. I always say that it's like electrolysis. It's or tweezing, waxing, and threading is like fertilizing a garden, and I'm trying to kill it.
Mhm.
So if you do both at the same time, they're working against each other. There's no point.
It's so funny that you just said that because I said that it's like me taking care of my garden and you putting weed enhancing stuff in the situation. Not even like weed be gone, right? Like you're like, no, 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 let's feed the weeds. Like,
Yes.
and it is true though. That is
Yes.
probably the most close scenario.
The
Uh
only reason electrolysis wouldn't work is because you're doing something like that. So you're waxing, tweezing, or threading between your sessions,
Mhm.
or it's just, the electrolysis isn't done properly.
Mhm.
So otherwise, and this is like 20 years of experience, there has never been a case where electrolysis cannot help. Never,
Correct.
never.
Yeah. And like even going forward, like I think to our moms, right? So our moms are both been electrologists for over 40 years in that same space. That is like literally the same thing. And it's like if in 43 years or 42 years or wherever you guys are at in your journeys, you haven't seen it unless somebody is doing something adverse or like whether it be technician is doing something adverse or patient. Like it's permanent is permanent is permanent. Dead hair is dead hair is dead hair. However we got there, the hair is dead. But if you are undoing everything that we do, it's
No.
not gonna go well for you. Melissa said, I repeat in the consultation in the words, time and financial commitment a few times to a client. Yep, exactly. You want to say, do you have the time and do you have the financial commitment? If you do, then you're good to go. Anita, do you have any experience with non-laser hair reduction like Apple free? Non-laser hair. Okay, what do you mean by non-laser hair reduction?
Um,
It-
actually, I got this book from Milady, the new
yes.
books
Yeah.
released for electrolysis hair removal. So they had this thing called the newest development called non-laser hair removal. It's like a serum, and the popular website is eftropics.com. So it says that you apply this right after the treatment, whether you're doing laser or electrolysis, and then it kind of it doesn't need the follicles. It kind of like slows down the growth.
Okay,
So
So
now I know what you're talking about. Sorry, my brain went
yeah.
to catch up. So, do I have experience with it? An adjacent product. Vanika is the same thing. So, if you're doing
oh,
electrolysis and then you kind of piggyback to that and use a product that is androgen blocking, then you will see a reduction. But when you stop using those products, it is
It comes back.
comes back.
Yeah.
okay.
Most of the
So
time, these things just slow down the hair growth cycle.
Mhm.
And
So
so that's all it
how-
does.
So basically it'll help for people, like you said, that, come once a month and, do in between treatments. Like I have clients flying down from East Malaysia and they come once a month. And for a while, it takes a while to reduce the density and they don't have the time. So they say, what do I do in between treatments? And I'm like, the only best thing you can do is to shave or to trim. And they said, but it grows back in 2 days. So I'm like, so I was thinking this would probably be the best, another solution for them. But then again, it's not available in Malaysia yet. So, so it'll be
So
more
my
costly.
experience with Vanica, or how do you guys all say that? Vanica. When that product came on the market, it was like in the early 2000s, that I got introduced to it. It made their overall process longer because
Okay.
it's like it's a band-aid effect until we got them enough under control that they can let up from what they're doing. And it doesn't help terminal hair growth. So if you have somebody that has hair 2 days later and it's thick, it's not going to touch that. It's not going to reverse terminal growth.
I was just going to say, I doubt that it would have that much of an effect on the hair structure that is that thick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It really, so those products, what I tell my patients that are coming in, and you guys, like, I love doing peach fuzz because it's just like a weird satisfaction thing. But those ones that come in and they're like, I can see all of these, right?
Yeah.
And they pull on them, it helps those. Like that's the person that helps. It also helps the woman that comes
Okay.
in and she's got like fine.
I don't like doing peach fuzz because that takes too much of my eye concentration. But I did get a new client. Her hands, she's an Arab descent and she has got peach fuzz kind of hair from here right up to the end. All the angles are upwards. So I'm doing this back way of doing it. It's a nightmare. But have you done that and does it really clear? Because all I can see, I've just reduced patches and I don't know if she's committed to spend that much of money. I think it'll take at least, looking at her right now with my 20 years of experience, it'll take at least 70, 80 hours of treatment. So is that what you?
I mean, that's pretty typical. To have like those high hours with such a large amount of that hair that's active on the upper arms. Um, uh, I would not patch. I would give her overall, like that feathering that Joanie was talking about. If you can give somebody the at least thinning of the overall area, you're going to notice such a big benefit from her treatments, and she'll notice that reduction even quicker. But patches, anytime you work in little wheels, it gets you nowhere.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would maybe try to figure out a position, Anita, where you can be at the top of the table and work in the direction, because I think that that's going to speed you up too.
True.
Yeah.
But the thing is, she needs to probably hang her head a bit so her shoulder is upper to the top of the bed. If I'm on top of the bed.
How close are you working to your clients?
I got the loops now, so it's about 1 feet. So
Just 12 inches. Okay.
yeah. So I kind of like I have to take a photo and show it to you next time, my positions, because I now have to go for physical physiotherapy every a week to just loosen up all my joints. But I work in small times. Yeah. So I let her sit up sometimes. And like I change my position every 15 minutes, 20 minutes, just to, like you said, feathering. So I don't work on one area the whole time. I keep moving about here and there, and then we move on to the next hand. So I don't go back to that retreated area in that 15 minutes. So I clean up this patch a bit and then I lighten that. Yeah. So that's good that you guys have done it, because I always say no to those.
Oh no, yeah. And there, to me, it's like, I don't know, it's like a typewriter. I'm just moving back and forth, thinning.
Oh.
It's very satisfying for me.
Okay.
As long as it's not like a high maintenance client, it's just high maintenance hair, I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
But I would say like, have her lay on her side
Mhm.
so that you can kind of come in line with it.
Yeah.
And then you can be nice and upright, so you're only 12 inches up from her side, and put like a pillow against her chest so that she has something that she's not rolling forward.
Right.
That's one, like a kind of like more like paint me like one of your French girls, like kind of like how she has to like lay on her side, and that will flatten this out. Sorry, I don't. I'm like I know I have French girls on here, but like it kind of like would flatten out that side. I at some
I bought this Apple had this electrology convention like few years ago. They had this thing, and one of the segments was talking about positioning, and they had all these little pillows to put here, put there to get all these different positions, and that was a very helpful class. So yeah, I've been doing that a lot. So my other friends said, "Why do you have all the small pillows and there's categories everywhere?" I said, "You have no idea how valuable they are."
Yeah.
they're so good. I love those pillows.
Yeah.
Melissa said best answer for clients who say after I tweeze or wax, the hair grows back so fast in a few days. What do we say then? Is that what you're asking me, Melissa? If you want to type that in there. Yes. Okay. So what do you say when the client's like, after I tweeze or wax, the hair grows back so fast in just a few days? What do you say, Joanie?
Well, then it just means that we're going to have to increase the intervals of how often you come into the office. Most of the time, if I have somebody that's like that, it means that they might come in twice, maybe sometimes even 3 times a week in the beginning if they can't leave it be.
Yeah.
So they have to stop tweezing, they have to stop waxing. So no matter what, you're stopping. If that means if you can't come in 2, 3 times a week, then you're just gonna have to trim or shave in between to keep it flush with the skin. But I would probably, I honestly, clients that don't do this is one of my biggest things. If you're gonna tweeze or wax in between, then I don't want you in my books. There's other clients that would want that space, that would be serious about it. We kind of made a mention last week, and I just had a little comment about it. And it's like, I feel like sometimes, most of the time, I'm more invested in my client's journey with hair removal than they are, because I know what this does, and I know what kind of results they're going to get. I've done it over and over and over again, and so like I know what the you is going to think and feel a year from now.
Yeah.
When we're just getting, little hairs here and there. So the only people I want on my table are serious people. If I can't, get them to kind of adhere to my treatment plan and my conditions as far as how I want this to go for the most part, then they can probably go somewhere else. And if they don't do that and it's not explained well, then they're going to say electrolysis doesn't work, which is bad for the whole field.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens too. They go online and say, I tried electrolysis, it doesn't work. But then, they didn't do it right.
Yeah. Melissa, one of the things that popped into my head was when a client says it grows back in a few days. The fact is there's no possible way that the hairs you pluck out today came back in a few days.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
growth cycle, even when stimulated, overstimulated, I can't imagine it growing faster than a 4-week interval through its entire life, even if it was like overly stimulated, right? Like, and that's like somebody that's like probably on testosterone, probably tweezing, like that's just like a fast growth period. Your face is between 13 and 16 weeks in its anagen phase. In the center part of your face, it can be up to a year, depending on how long you can get those hairs. So like think of the guys from ZZ Top with the big beards, right? Their beard in the anagen phase is very long. That's how you can get a long beard like that. Others, their beard kind of shortens, and then when it starts to dry out on the ends, that's kind of their max point. So to tell me that it's back a couple days later, what you're actually telling me is that you have a substantially worse problem than what you realize. And so in that case, a lot of times what I'm actually saying to the patient during a consultation is if you find that you're tweezing and waxing daily, I want you to make a consideration of how many hairs you're pulling out every day, and then multiply that by the amount of days within that growth cycle. You have a much larger problem than you realize. 10 hairs could be very easily 100 hairs when left unchecked. And so they will never know the true severity of their hair problem if they stopped tweezing and waxing for, let's say, 4 months. They probably would be able to see the full magnitude of the problem that they actually caused. And that's not to say that they meant to cause it. That's just to say like, hey, like this is a natural consequence of stimulating hair growth. But it will be there. And so if they do see that it's coming that fast, let's book you frequently. And I have like, if you guys go on to like my website on the shop part, you'll see that I have these little shavers that patients can buy underneath the distribution side, that are called calm razors. Part of the proceeds go to PCOS research. They're a cute little cylindrical style razor. They look a little bit like a large lipstick. They aren't silent, but they're quieter than other, electric, razors. I still think they have enough of a sound, so you couldn't go, like, into the break room and shave your face without anybody knowing that you're buzzing on your face, right? But, like, you could, shave in your bathroom at home and tell everybody. It's so funny because even my kids, use the little calm razors, and that's how they shave because it's a safe way to shave your face. It cuts it just short enough that you still will feel it, but you won't necessarily see it. And those are some of the ways that I will have them manage it in between. I'd rather you clip them with cuticle scissors or a calm razor
Mhm.
than anything else.
Yeah. And Melissa, during the consultation, that's one thing that we address when we talk about the hair growth cycles and the treatment plan. And so usually I'll explain that, like skin regenerates about every 28 days when you're 18 years old and healthy.
Mhm.
And so from that point on, it just gets slower and slower. And that's just the skin. So when I go in and cause damage inside the hair follicle has to first clear off the damage, and then from there regenerate the fibroblasts, regenerate the tissue, right, the collagen and the elastin. Then the hair has to regenerate, and then the hair has to grow out of the skin. So that process takes way longer than 4 weeks. So let's say we say 4 weeks just to be generous on a
Very good.
super hormonal hair, so it wants to grow really really fast. There's a lot of blood flow going to it, and maybe it's a very young person. That's being generous. Most of the time it takes longer than that. So the hairs that they're doing every single day are different hairs. And usually when that light bulb goes off, you see it, then they understand just how expansive the problem is.
Yeah. Anita also asked, I just want to double check on what you're asking. So the hair breaks while plucking. Is it while you're extracting the hair or while the patient is plucking?
No, when she said that when she tweezes and it grows back in few
Yeah.
days. So when she's tweezing,
Oh,
she's
the
not tweezing
patient
the
broke the
entire
hair.
hair out. So the hair is breaking inside and then it grows out after 2 days or something. It's
Okay.
And I
almost
think
like
it's it's important to note too that like there's a difference between a hair that is growing out new and a hair that has been cut.
Yeah.
And
Cut,
so we can usually tell the difference, right? So we know when our
Yeah.
clients have been
Yeah.
shaving when they shouldn't be or doing other things. But the other thing that's important to note is when the electrologist accidentally cuts hairs when working. And
Mhm.
so it's like you have to be able to tell when your technique wasn't quite on point, right? So like areas like especially like here, I see that a lot
Mhm.
where people will cut hairs and cause a lot of ingrowns, bikini lines too. And
Mhm.
so sometimes like the electrology, if the insertion's off, that can cut hair too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like that cutting of the hair is yes, sometimes forceps are so brand new and so sharp that that happens. But usually it's breakage during treatment because you didn't give it enough uh,
Mhm.
of the proper insertion 100% of the time, or the balanced energy is also important in that. But like if your insertion is off, it does not matter if your energy is balanced enough. You didn't get to your target. I mean,
Yeah.
you might have hit the board, right? But that bullseye was never achieved. And so we need a bullseye every time. And so that's a big part of it. So if you're looking in that and you're wondering, like, what can I be doing differently? If you're finding that you're having to retreat hairs a lot, if you're finding that the hairs are breaking, when you go to do extract, you're not like getting a smooth extraction. I mean, the fact is like you can get real frustrated real quick when those hairs aren't coming out the way you want to. But a lot of
Mhm.
times it just comes down to like slowing yourself down enough to realize that we got to just adjust our hand a little bit.
I was
There's a
not I was just thinking about the clients themselves, because when they
No.
pluck their own hairs, right? Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah.
No, we know. We just
all
went
the
off on a tangent.
Yeah, that's not to the technician. It's just like
No.
just saying like it happens on both ends for
You
sure.
just brought up some other ideas. That's why we kind of
Oh, okay,
piggybacked
good.
off of that. Don't worry.
Yeah, you're good. It's so funny because it is like that is the way a teacher thinks. It's like our brain's like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
Cut hairs. Okay.
there's more.
Right.
Today, we want to shine some light on some of our amazing partners who are helping shape the future of electrology education, services, distribution, and so much more. We're thrilled to have such amazing partners and supporters. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned professional, these vendors and schools have what you need to succeed. Heading to the Golden State, California Electrology Academy offers an immersive learning experience that prepares students for national certification, as well as many states with reciprocity to California's licensing exams. Led by Joannie and Joanne Gonella, they bring decades of quality services and education. CEA offers flexible schedules, open enrollment, and a supportive learning environment, making them a perfect place to start your electrology journey. Be sure to check them out for cutting-edge education right in sunny Southern California. And visit electrologyacademy.com. That's electrologyacademy.com. When it comes to top-tier machines, look no further than Aesthetic Systems. They offer the latest in technology for both the electrology and aesthetics industry. Their machines, furniture, and more are known for reliability and precision, helping the professionals deliver the best results to their clients. Stay ahead of the curve with Aesthetic Systems' innovative tools. You can learn more about them at aestheticsystems.com. That's aestheticsystems.com.
Hey there, electrologists. My name is Hazel Bloom. I'm a life coach for the LGBTQIA+ community and its allies. As a trans woman, I have done the hard work and introspection to figure out who I am, what I want from life, and how to live authentically as myself. These are universal skills that I can teach you and help you gain the confidence to thrive. Also, I know that the conversations with clients on the table can get a bit intense and beyond the scope of electrology, so I'd invite you to refer them to me so they can get the support they need through a tough time instead of taking that burden on yourself. I'm also available as a resource for you if you just need some assistance figuring out how to help a client or to ask any questions. Whatever you need, I can help. My website is kiwifruitcoaching.com, or you can email me directly, hazel@kiwifruitcoaching.com.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrolysis Unplugged. Be sure to check out our amazing sponsors for the best in electrology tools, training, technology, and so much more. Now, back to the show.
What do I tell a person who wants all of their hair removed from their whole body and their face? Okay. So, Joannie, what are you telling somebody that's like, I want every last stitch of hair gone?
Normally, we would have a talk about priorities first. So during consultation, most of the time that tells me that they don't really understand what electrolysis actually entails.
Mhm.
And so they're unrealistic, but we would, explain the processes hair by hair. But at the same time, I would say that we need to concentrate on your most important thing first. So let's work through priorities. Tell me what the most important thing is. I can, and I do a lot of peach fuzz, and I do very, very, very detailed work. So I've always been, like I've with clients that want, all of the peach fuzz off of their face, or like the client that you have, Anita, like I do that type of work all the time, massive peach fuzz clearances. So I will do it, but the client has to understand what that undertake is, because it's not a quick thing. It's a lot of hours. So normally you have to kind of give it to them in bite-sized pieces. I have a client like that right now, actually. She kind of wants to do everything. And so we've, done her face, and then it was her chest and stomach. And now we're doing like her butt cheeks and hips and lower back and arms. And so it's a lot, but like if you go at it with a strategy and she's kind of on board with it, then it's doable. But it has to be explained thoroughly that this is not going to be quick. And I like to start with one project first. Most important one. That's what we're going to focus on.
So I'm the same way. Priorities are a huge part. I'm gonna hit return on something that's happening here. So on this page on my website, because I do insurance through like medical billing, as well as cosmetic electrolysis. So I'm on both ends of the spectrum. And when I have someone that is asking me for a heavy clearance, okay, about halfway down, and you can kind of see what I'm asking from the patients, what our requirements are on this page. Um, but about halfway down, when it says next steps, you're going to see, let us know your goals, and it says please finish the form here. Obviously not to right this second, but copy and paste that into your notes. That is a supplemental jot form that I created for our patients that are really trying to conquer a very large scale of hair removal. In there, it talks about priorities. So it talks about like all of the areas that are bothering you, all the areas that could be covered by insurance that we can ask for. Um, it asks for images, with the exception of genital images, of all the areas of desired hair growth at both a shaved look and then 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours later. Just so we can see just from that. Part of that is because that's what we have to put into for our medical billing. Okay. And the other part is it kind of gets them to understand I need to see very clear images, because if I can't see the hair follicles in your pictures, um, then we need to be able to have like an assessment of what's going on, right? And so it's kind of starts to create some truth telling and some reality checks for the patient. But on there is a priority section. It talks about like from 1 to 10 of like 10 different areas. What is your area of importance as you're going through these common areas of hair removal? And in doing so, it helps me start to plan out how to set up their treatment plans. If, for example, face and Brazilian are equal at 1, okay, then I know that whenever I book them an appointment, I am basically going to book them half the time on the face and half the time on the Brazilian, okay? Whether that be in the same session or every other week, toggling back and forth between the two, does not matter to me, but they have to understand that if I'm going after 2 at number 1, that I need to equally disperse my time, okay? Unless for whatever reason that hair is not as bad in one area than it is in the other. So if I only did an hour in one zone, but 3 hours in the other, we'll book it accordingly, right? And then from there, when I start their intake, it gives me the opportunity to do basically a very detailed soap note, talk about realistic goals during treatment, what to expect during treatment. And it really gives me a very pointed plan for them, because when someone comes in, I want to get every last stitch of hair done. I'm like, same, but what is doable for me? What can I offload to a laser technician? What needs uh, more focus, more different types of energy, all of that. Like I can look at that from a different perspective. So that is a huge one for me. But priorities is number 1 there. So another great question is, how long after surgeries that are in the areas that I'm working do I need to wait before I can have treatments again? So if it's for gender affirming surgeries, it's dependent on the surgeon. Okay. If, say, for example, you're having a facelift and you're having face work done with electrolysis, I'm going to tell you that as long as that stitch line is fresh, we need to give it time before I put tension on it. Okay. So if your doctor says you can have tension on that stitch line at 6 weeks, then I will work on it at 6 weeks, and you will sign a waiver saying that the doctor approved that and I got a doctor's note for it. If that stitch line still looks red and angry, guess what? Even if the doctor says no or yes, I'm saying no. Because you just spent a ridiculous sum of money over here, and I'm not going to be the reason for its failure. Same thing goes for like cosmetic procedures like Juvederm and Botox and the PDO.
No, the threads, the sugar threads. Yeah.
So all of that is structural stuff that if I go and work while you're doing that, it's I always tell my patients corrective care and electrolysis care can't really be at the same time in the same area. And so whether it be a surgery or a procedure, we have to consider which one we're going to be doing right now until we can lighten the load. So if
Yeah,
it's
some things are not
Yeah.
obviously invasive, but like manipulating the skin and the tissues would be a problem, especially if you're doing fillers and Botox. You know, you don't want to be moving that product around. And so, you know, and other things, it's just a possible infection story. So we're just, you know, not going to mess with it.
And like when we were in the so when I was working for my family's med spa, one of the big things that was they want to come in for Juvederm and they want to come in for electrolysis at the same time. And I'm like, you just spent, $1,200 on your filler. You do not need a 15-minute electrolysis upper lip treatment right now. It's usually no less than 4 weeks, and preferably I want to give it 6 to 8 weeks before I put a bunch of heat in there. I just don't want to denature that product too soon. So, yeah. We still have there was a second part of this question. When it comes to face, breast, and genital reconstruction, how soon after those? You average, depending on if there's bone work, anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks on the low end, and then upwards to a year with some of the more profound bone work procedures, because it takes a long time for stuff to heal, especially if they've moved your jaw around or your like the front of your head around. You Even though you can't see it, it still can be heavily problematic. And like just today, I had a 3-hour patient who had facial feminization surgery 10 months ago. And she's like, I still am very tender in that area. And I'm like, I don't doubt it. And that's why we don't go up there for more than a couple minutes at a time. And I don't put any pressure there. I stretch back here. I don't want to be in this area just pushing on it. Same with noses. Noses can take up to a year to heal. So if somebody had a nose job and you're over here doing the lip work, if you bonk that nose, they're gonna through the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like surgery prep, like soft tissue work is so much faster of a heal than if once you start messing with muscles and bones. Well,
All right.
now it's time to say goodbye. So
Okay.
until next week,
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone, or morning.
Good night.
yes, both. Bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.